Hi everybody, we are going to continue with the new science chapter. And what is the science chapter? What is it? Interdependence in living beings, that is plants and animals. How plants and animals are dependent on each other. Dependence of plants on animals. How plants are dependent on animals. There are points I have made. Plants depend on animals for several basic needs. Now, what are the basic needs? Let us see. Point number 1. Animals breathe out carbon dioxide, which is used by plants to prepare food by the process of photosynthesis. So, animals breathe out, we breathe out carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide is used by plants to make their food. Bees and insects pollinate flowers, thus help in producing and production of fruits and seeds. So you have learnt in the previous chapter how pollination takes place. Bees, they pollinate the flowers. Why? And these flowers change into fruits, which gives us food as well as seeds. Animals help in dispersal of fruits and seeds. Okay. Next point. Excreta of animals provide nutrients to plants. So animals' droppings, they mix with the soil and become manure for plants. Animals on dying get decomposed by microorganisms, which thus add nutrients to the soil. These nutrients are used by plants for growth and survival. Now, microorganisms are very tiny living things which cannot be seen by the eyes. You need a microscope, so that is why they are called microorganisms. Okay, and they decompose means when animals, plants, they die, they change that dead plants and animals into nutrients, okay, and which gets mixed with the soil, and then that soil is used by plants for growth and survival. Earthworms aerate the soil so that the roots of plants can better obtain oxygen. Now, what does this mean? You have seen an earthworm. What does it do? It digs into the soil. It makes the soil loose, and that is how oxygen is able to go into the soil for plants, so that plants can breathe in through the roots. Now, how animals are dependent on plants? Okay, animals depend on plants for their following needs. Now, what are the needs? Number 1, animals depend directly or indirectly on plants for their food. Now, some they depend directly, like herbivores, and some indirectly, like carnivores. Now, we'll come to that later. Then, second point, trees provide shade and shelter to animals such as monkeys, squirrels, birds and insects. Now, you have seen birds, they make their nest in trees, so it is giving them a home. Then, shelter. Some animals, they come underneath when it rains, or when it's too hot, they come under the shade. Okay. Human beings use plants for different reasons, for fuel, to make furniture, to make the house. Okay. Then plants provide us with what? With cotton, jute, flax, lac, oil, etc. to make clothes, dyes and medicines. Next point. Plants maintain the requirement composition of carbon dioxide and oxygen on the earth. This is very important. Okay. Why? The maintenance of oxygen in the air and carbon dioxide, they maintain that. So they take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. So they maintain that balance in the air. Thus we find that plants and animals are dependent on each other. So when you look at these points, you will come to know that animals and plants are dependent, but we are dependent more on plants. Next, groups of living beings. Now there are 2 types of living beings. What are the 2 types, main groups of living organisms? Producers and consumers. Now, who are producers and who are consumers? Okay, producers. Living organisms that prepare their own food are called producers. Living organisms who can make their own food. And who are those? It's mostly all green plants are producers, as they make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. So only green plants which can make their own food are called producers. They are called autotrophs also. Now, what do you mean by autotrophs? With the presence of heat and light, they make their food. So that is why they are called autotrophs. Now consumers, who are consumers, many living organisms cannot produce their own food. We cannot make our own food. Okay, they depend on plants and other living organisms for their food. They are called consumers. Okay, so they cannot make their own food, so that is why they are called consumers. Consumers can further be classified into following subcategories. Now these consumers can be divided in further down into subcategories. What are those categories? Number one, herbivores. Okay, what are herbivores? Animals that eat only plants. Example, rabbits, cows, deer, and there are many more. They are also called primary consumers because they consume plants in the beginning. So that is why they are called primary first. Then we have another category that are carnivores. And who are carnivores? Animals that eat only flesh of other animals are called carnivores. Example, lion, tiger, wolves. Then we have another category that is omnivores. Omnivores, animals that eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. Okay, they both eat both plants and animals. Example, human beings, rats, bears, etc. Carnivores and omnivores are called secondary consumers. Who was the first primary consumer? Herbivores. Now we have secondary consumers, that is omnivores and carnivores. Now we have another category that is called scavengers. Now who are scavengers? Animals that eat the remains of dead animals. When an animal or plant dies, those animals that eat, okay, them are called scavengers. Who are they? Hyenas, vultures, termites, etc. Then you have decomposers. Some living things are so tiny that they cannot be seen with the naked eye. In the beginning I had told you about the microscopic. Okay, they are called microscopic organisms. You cannot see them. Okay, but they are there. And what do? They decompose dead and decaying matter. Any animal that dies or plants dies, they go into it, they feed on it, they change it, okay, and they get mixed with the soil and become nutrients for plants. They are called decomposers. Okay, example, bacteria and fungi. By consuming dead plants and animals, when microscopic animals, living things, when they consume them, by consuming dead plants and animals, scavengers and decomposers help in keeping the environment clean. So the environment becomes clean. You don't have to remove them. They decompose, they give out a horrible smell when an animal dies. So then very slowly you will find that they get decomposed and mixed with the soil, and that soil becomes nutrient for plants. Now, this is very important. Food chain. Now, why do we need a food chain? Food chain is very important so that there is a balance in nature. Okay, now how? We'll come to that later. Now, what is food chain? The sequence of who eats who, okay, in nature for obtaining nutrition is called a food chain. Again, I repeat it. The sequence of who eats who in nature for obtaining nutrition is called a food chain. Now, who eats who? In the beginning, you have learned that primary producers eat plants and then they are eaten by carnivorous animals. So, like this, a chain, who eats who. Okay, herbivorous animals are eating plants and then carnivores are eating herbivores. So, who eats who in nature to survive is called a food chain. A food chain always begins with plants. Remember this. After plants, the next organisms are herbivores. So herbivores eat plants and then followed by carnivores. At the end of the food chain, there are scavengers and decomposers. So in the beginning it begins with plants, then you have herbivores, then carnivores, and then it ends by scavengers and decomposers. Here you will see a chart, okay, where you can see the food chain. There are 3 different charts where a food chain is shown, like corn, a plant. Who eats it? A rat. And who eats a rat? An owl. Here you can see they are beginning with plants, carrots. Then a rabbit eats it. Who eats a rabbit? A fox. So this is how we know who eats who. That is called a food chain. And this food chain is very important. It is required in nature so that balance is maintained. If we do not have carnivorous animals in the forest, then what will happen? There will be herbivorous animals. They'll keep multiplying and they'll keep eating the plants, and then eventually there won't be any plants at all green around you. So to balance that, we need both carnivorous as well as herbivorous animals. Okay? A food chain maintains balance in nature. A balance between the number of plants and animals at a place is very important for the survival of all living beings. Hence, nature maintains balance in all types of environment. Now, reasons why is balance in nature required, we have already learned. But there is an imbalance created. Okay, you will find that it's becoming very hot these days, or sudden change in the weather. So why are these happening? Is because of imbalance. And how does this imbalance take place? In fulfilling our basic needs, human beings, to fulfill our needs, okay, we human beings have been very careless towards nature. We did not take care, we did not think what is going to happen, and we are responsible for the imbalance in nature or man-made disasters. And what are the man-made disasters that we created that imbalance? Is one, deforestation, by cutting down the forest, okay, pollution, hunting animals, forest fire. So these are the reasons why there was an imbalance in nature. Then natural disasters also, just not us, nature also takes a different turn, like for example earthquakes. So that is how an imbalance takes place. Volcanoes, they erupt, destroy many things, then floods. So these are the reasons why there is an imbalance in nature, man-made as well as nature. Okay? So I want you to read the chapter, go through the video again, read the chapter and try and understand it. And then in the end I want you to draw, color and label to show a simple food chain. What else? Draw and color one producer, a primary consumer, a secondary consumer, a scavenger and a decomposer in your science copy. Thank you.